Hilchas Keilim Perek Shmini. Kol klei matches eina mikabim tuma ache tigomer melachton kulo. So we learned benegeh kliates that gol mikliates are makabel tuma. So even though it knows once you have a kliates which is already a makabel, it knows whatever was necessary for it to become a makabel you did. Now it's only a question you want to finish it off. There's things you want to finish it off. Nevertheless, it's already makabel tuma. Benegeh klier, we learned in the previous perek that over there you have to wait till you finish off all the finishings. It's not enough that it's a makabel that's going to do its function, but rather you want to completely finish what it was supposed to, what you intend on doing with it. Now that is a benegeh klimatches. By klimatches we're saying that eina makabel tuma ad shetigomer melachton kula. V'liyeh akeli mechuser ma'aseh klal. Over here the Rambam is like more madgish. V'liyeh akeli mechuser ma'aseh klal. Avol gol miklimatches, something that's gol miklimatches, which means something which is an unfinished product. Einon mekabel tuma is not mekabel tuma. Ve'elu ein gol miklimatches. Kel she'asid lo shavesi. Even if you intend on rubbing it. A l'shabitz. L'shabitz means to make like little decorations of squares, like to make squares around it, which to make indentations into it. A legar is also a certain rubbing. Rashi says that loshuv is done with barzel, and legar is done with kesef azov. It's different ways of shining something. In other words, it's really ready. It's just you want to still shine it. You want to give it a shine. Oy lecharkev. The charkev is also to make some type of a design into it, like a round design, usually some indentation that goes around and around. A lahakish bekurnis, or it needs still a bang with a hammer. Or it was missing a handle. And again, it's usable, but it's missing a handle. Or it's missing, let's see, the rim on the top is missing. Is all these cases hareza eine mekabel tuma achi saknenu v'yapeu v'leitishor be'moloch klal. So in order for it to be makabel tuma, the metal has to be already finished, completely finished. In other words, you don't have to shine it anymore, you don't have to rub it anymore, you don't have to bang it, you don't have to add any points to it. It's completely a finished product. It's ready to be, completely finished. Ketzad. Hasayif eini makabel tuma achi yishufenu. In other words, until you smoothen it out, and the sword has to be completely smoothed out. Only then is the sayif considered a keli that's makabel tuma, even though it could function, but it has to be yishufenu. V'ashsaken achi ashchizena. The knife has to be sharpened. V'chein kol kiyetze b'maisem elu. In other words, again, we're talking about the fact that it's not sharpened, or the fact that it's not shining, doesn't in any way really necessarily interfere with the fact that the keli is perfectly functionable. But nevertheless, since your intention is to do that, so therefore this is considered gol meklimatris, and gol meklimatris is not makabel tuma. Once it becomes a klimatris and now it's missing its shine, it still retains its shem keli. The point over here is that it doesn't become a keli until you reach a point where there's nothing more you have to do to it. Lefichoch. So as a result of this comes out, as a Keilim in a eshes shalbars. Now when you take metal out of the ground, so that metal is coarse, and you first have to cleanse the metal. You have to take out all the pselis of the metal. So when you take it out of the ground, and if you don't cleanse it, and you make a keli out of this eshes shalbarzel, so then this keli will never reach a point where it's really a proper keli. If we're saying a keli has to reach a point where you have to rub it and you have to shine it, this will never be able to reach such a point. So therefore, if you make Keilim in ha'eshes shalbarzel, which is the ore of iron ore, let's say for example, that you just take out of the ground that still has impurities in it. Eimen ha'charara shel matches. Ha'charara shel matches is also a bar that's made out of this iron, but was never purified. Or minhas, that's one ephon that it was taken from iron, which was never purified. So therefore, you'll never be able to reach that level of perfection that you normally want when you finish off a keli. Or minaseviv shel galgal. As a mitzvah, you take a piece of metal. Now the galgal with wheels, and those wheels were wheels made out of wood, and around the wood they would put metal. So you take that metal off that wooden wheel, or minatasim, or you take a sheet of metal, or minatzipuyim, or you take metal which is a covering, or mikania kelim, or you take metal which was a support for another keli. It was a kan was a support for another keli. or mi'ogni Keilim, it was the handles of the Keilim, or the rims of the Keilim, or mi'ogni Keilim is the rims of the Keilim, or mi'ozni Keilim, or the supports of the handles of the Keilim, or min hashchayla. Mishchayla is also iron that's taken out of a keli. There's a certain iron that when you're working with a keli, you take out a piece of iron, or min agredus, or you cut off a piece of iron. B'kitzur, we're talking about scrap metal. We're talking about all of this. We're talking about over here from ha'isa kelim and ha'eshes shalbat. No, there's ha'isa kelim and ha'eshes shalbaz mecharor shalbat matches is talking about metal which is raw metal. And men hasev v'shel galgal is already talking about metal, which is scrap metal. Is in all these cases harelu teirim. Why? Nipnei shekol elu shenasu gol miklei matchesen. So I think the way the Kesef Mishnah explains pshat is as again, when you use metal that's raw metal, so that metal will never really be able to be a proper metal keli, which you want it to be. In other words, when a person makes a metal keli, so you have proper metal, which you already took out the impurities, then you go ahead and you shine it and you make it nice and you rub it down, so then it becomes a nice metal keli. Mashenkin, if you're going to take a keli that's being made out of metal, which has its impurities in it, it'll never reach that level. So therefore, it'll always be b'pchinas gol mikli matches. That's number one. And then there's another mitzvah where you take scrap metal and you bang them together. You're not smelting it down. If you smelt down this, so then it's beseder. Mashenkin over here, the nose from min hasev v'shel galgal, is not talking about, even though Lashon Aram sounds like it's one Inyan, but that's how it's being explained, that from min hasev v'shel galgal is talking about you using scrap metal and you're banging it together in order to make a metal keli. So that's not considered a keli, because it'll always be a gol mikli matches. It'll always be mipnei shekol elu shenasu gol mikli matches. Avalo isa keli mishivre kli matches. If a person is going to take a broken kli matches, or min kelim shenishchol kumerev azman, or kelim that were rubbed down merev azman, or min amasmeris, or from nails sheyodua shenasim in kelim that we knew that these nails were once part of kelim, is harei elu mekablim tuma. Why? Shlefi she'inam gilman. Now, it sounds like because since they were once a keli, so therefore they're not gilman. But the way the Mefarshim explain is the pshat is that since they're coming from a keli, so it's a zikr. You can't really make. They're too thick in order to smelt them, to bang them together and make a keli. So what you're going to have to do is smelt them down and then make a keli out of it. So Memela, since you smelted it down and made a keli from it, so Memela, it's a proper keli. That's how the Kesef Mishnah says. I mean, the pastors, you're reading the words, it sounds like, l'chura, you'd be able to see how the keli was made. Was the keli made by smelting it down or not by smelting it down? Vice versa, you can't. I'm not sure. As we're saying, the point over here is you take metal and you bang it together and you make a keli out of it. That's not a proper keli. That's considered gil mikli matches, even though it's functionable, but it's gil mikli matches. Masha'enkin, when you smelt it down, so then it's proper kli matches. Now, we're saying if it was made from shivri kli matches or kelim shenishchatu, so then we could understand that it's smelted down. It's l'chura, you could see whether or not how the keli was made. But that's how the Kesef Mishnah learns. So obviously over here we're talking about their nails, and we don't really know where they came from. So you can't see whether it came from kelim and ashes. So then harei and tehedin, afilu hiskin eisam lekeli, and even if you take these masmeres and you make it into a keli, eina mekabim tumah, because we know that they're probably coming from an eshes, and therefore they're not a proper keli. I mean, the technical mitziasin of how exactly it looks is hard to understand, but the general idea we have is, it's clear, that a kli matches, in order to be a keli, it can't be gol mikliyates, it has to be a finished product. It has to be something that was completely finished, keli, like, the way it's going to be presented in the store to be sold, completely finished. And if it's not completely finished, so then it's not considered a keli, which is makabel tumah. Now, the technicality is, when do we assume that it is completely finished? When do we assume it's not completely finished? So we have to understand the metzias. L'chura, you could see it. Halacha gimel. Kli matches she'enim mechusra lekisui. The keli is completely made, but it's missing the cover. Is mekabel tumah she'ena kisui choshev migufa keli. So even though this keli is taka missing a kisu, but that doesn't make it a gel mikliyetz. It's a gel miklimatris. It's a perfectly finished klimatris. It's just missing a cover. Halacha dalet. Machat shalei nikva. You have a needle that you never put an eye, you never put a hole in the needle. Elashafa v'tikna lekach mitchilasa. Yilchatchila made a needle without an eye. Is mekabelus tuma? It's mekabel tuma. What kind of keli is a needle? A needle that has an eye in it is you could sew with. What kind of keli is a machat which cannot, which doesn't have an eye? Is mekabelus tuma? It's something which can be used to take out a splinter. That's only talking about if Yilchatchila had in mind to make a needle without the eye. But if your intent is to make an eye to this needle, to make a hole in this needle, is arehi kishar gol miklimatches. So it's like a regular gol miklimatches, you know, there's an unfinished klimatches. Ve'ena mekabelas tumah, so it's not mekabel tumah. Halacha hei. Me'achar shibiarnu, shegol miklimatches teir, and the gol mikliyetz tmeim. So we learned that a gol miklimatches matches, which is unfinished, is tmei. Gol miklimatches is teir, and gol mikliyetz is tmei. And on the other hand, pshuti klimatches is tmei, or pshuti kliyetz is tehirim din teir. Even though we learned pshuti kliyetz could also be tami midrabon, but menateira pshuti kliyetz is tehirim. It's nimtza, so it comes out hatami bikliyetz tor biklimatches. What's tami bikliyetz, which is gol mikliyetz, is tor b'klimatches. For a klimatches it would be tor, because gol miklimatches is tor. V'hatame b'klimatches, which is pshuti klimatches, which is tame b'klimatches, is tor b'kliyetz. So again, so what's tame b'kliyetz, which is gol mikliyetz, is tor b'klimatches, because gol miklimatches is teirim, and which is tame b'klimatches, which is pshuti klimatches, that's tor b'kliyetz, because pshuti kliyetz are teirim. Halacha vov. Kol klei ha-milchama. Keilim which are used for milchama, again, a sayef, a knife, v'horemach, and a spear, v'akeva, and a hat, like a helmet, v'ashiryein, and a coat of armor, v'amagafayim, and the special boots that are also that protect the feet, u'kiyetzebem, are all mekablim tumah, because they're all part of a person's, they're takshitim, or levushim for a person. V'chol takshiti ha'adam, and all takshitim that a person would wear, kigen hakatla, which is a necklace, vanizam, and nose ring, vatabois, and ears, and rings, ben sheyesh aleim chesim, ben she'ein aleim chasim, whether it has a signet or it doesn't have signet, kiyesbem, mekablim tumah. V'afilu dinner shenifsel, if you have a dinner which is no longer usable, v'hiskine, and then you did something to it, litleise betzaver haktana, to hang it up in the neck of a young girl, is mekablim tumah. Because lepel, you made it into a takshin, it's a takshin d'adam. The king kmeya shel matches, a kmeya of a matches that's made out of metal, is also mistamik called takshih d'adam, because pshutikli matches are tummy, and these are all called keilim, because they're mishamshim la'adam, or takshit la'adam, and the levush la'adam are all considered mishamshim la'adam, and therefore they are mekabel tumah. Halacha zayin. Kol takshiti abehema v'akelim, a takshit which is made for a behela v'kelim, ki en hataboy sho'isim l'tzavar ha-behema or la'ozni ha-kelim, is tahirim. So a takshit which is made for a adam, so that's considered a keli, and that's makabel tumah. Masha'enkin a takshit which is made for a behema, or it's made for a keli, for example, a ring that you put on the neck of the behema or you put on the handle of the keli, is tahirim, and ve'ena makabel tumah b'fnei atzma. They won't be makabel tumah b'fnei atzma. Whereas if the ring is on the keli, so it becomes bottle to the keli, it can become like a yad to the keli, so it can be makabel tumah together with the keli. But as bifnei atzmon, as being attached of a keli, it's not makabel tumah. Chutz mizug shel behema v'kelim, except for the bell of a behema v'kelim, hamashmiya kelo adam. Only when we're dealing with a bell, which is mashmiya kelo adam. Ketzad ha'isa zugin lemachteshes u'la'arisa. Weißt du is, the Gemara says that hakel yafel apsom. So noise is good lipsom. So mele, when you have a machteshes, like a spice mill, so they would put like a bell on it in order for it to make noise, and that noise was hakel yafel apsom. So mele, if you make a bell, a zug over here is talking about the outside of the bell, the machteshes for a mill, or the arisa, or for a cradle. Lemitpechei svarim, you put it on the metpachas of the svarim, like we have the musik of bells on the mantle of the Sefer Torah, or v'tinekas, or a child is walking with his bell, is all tahirim. They're tahirim. We're talking about when they don't have the klopper inside. However, also lehem in beilim, if they put the klopper inside the bell, so then is makabim tuma. Why? Hail v'nasu lashmiya kel adam la-adam. Since they're made lashmiya kel la-adam, is arein ketachshiti adam. It has a din of tachshiti adam, and memela de makabel tuma. So a bell that was put on Keilim or on a behema, and the purpose of it is lashmiya kel adam. Memela it has a klopper, so then it's makabel tuma. Va'afilu nitvu in b'leim. Now, even after the klopper was taken away, so the chura now they're no longer mashmir kel. Nevertheless, is mekabim tuma shariroi lakisha lacheres. They can still make noise. In other words, even though they don't have the klopper, but they can make noise. So originally, so they don't have it in their gel miklimatkus. In other words, obviously, it's the fact that they are originally able to make noise. That's not the purpose. The purpose to make noise is only when it has the klopper inside. But once it already had a din of a keli, because it had the klopper inside, because it could be mashmir kel. So even though that klopper is no longer there, so l'chura call it a shivri keli. So we say no, because since lepel this shivri keli is able to do me'ein malachtan narishim, which is to make the noise. So that making the noise now wouldn't be enough to make it a keli, but that making the noise now is enough to retain the shem keli on it. That's this din. That's this din. So I'll call upon him. There's a din. A takshir of a behemoth and a keli doesn't have a din of a keli. However, something that's mashmir kel, the Gemara learns it out from a pasuk. Something that's mashmir kel, so le'adam does have a din of a keli, and once it has a din of a keli because mashmir kel le'adam, so even if it doesn't have the klopper, since it could still be mashmir kel, it still has a din of a keli. Now, zug ha'asui le'adam, when you have a bell that was made for adam, is imnasa le'cotton, eine mekabel tumah, ella be'in bel shalei. If it was made for a cotton, it's not mekabel tumah, only if it has this klopper. Sharei lekil nasa. There was no point. You didn't put a bell on a cotton as a decoration. The bell on the cotton was only made for the noise, and therefore it has no noise. So it doesn't have any value. It doesn't have a din takshut. However, nasa legadol, if it was made for a gadol, sharei is a takshut. So then it can have a din of a takshut even if it has no klopper. Mekabel tuma aval b'shein li inbil. It has no inbil. Halacha tes. Kol ha-partzufis mekablis tumah. Now the Pashtunite partzufis sounds like a mask. But the Rambam brings from the Chazdei David, he brings also in Bartanur and Rashi, that l'maskana, that a mask is not mekabel tumah. A regular mask is not mekabel tumah. So therefore he's saying that the pshat kol ha-partzufis means it's sakeli, that's betzuras partzuf. That's not l'chura the Pashto way you read the Rambam. But I'll call upon kol ha-partzufis, Lashon Rambam's kol ha-partzufis mekablis tumah. We're saying that he brings from the Mefarshim that it doesn't mean kipshute, a mask is makabel tumah. That's the number one. Then he's saying v'chol hachisomis, all seals are tahirim. Chutz michoisim shel matches sheboy choismen bilvad. In other words, there's a musik called a seal. The Gemara speaks about a seal that they would, an eved, for example, would have a seal on his begodim, which would show that he's an eved. There would be different types of seals that were made from different materials that were sealed. And those chisomis are teirim. They're not amtachshit. They don't have a din of a tachshit, and therefore they don't have a. They're not mekabel tumah. However, a seal that's made out of metal, a signet, or something that's made out of metal that you could use it to seal something, so that's mekabel tumah because pshute kli matras are mekabel tumah. If it was made out of marshal eights, so then it would be pshute kli eights. It wouldn't be mekabel tumah. Masha'inkin, if it's pshute kli matras, it's mekabel tumah. It has a function. Nachamol. V'chol hachisomis teirim. All seals are Torah. Chutz michaisim shel matches. What does it mean, a seal of matches? Sheboy choismen b'vad. In other words, the seal of matches which you use to make seals with, so that's a keli, and since it's a keli, so memela is makabel tumah, even though it's pshute klei matches. Now v'chol hatabois teirim. All tabois rings are Torahs. Chutz mitabois etzba, which is used as a tachshit. Aval taboy shechoiger beyesmosnov, a ring that you put on your loins. I don't know which somehow or another you put your clothes together. In other words, you tighten your clothes. Or it should be oy shekoisher ben seifov, or it's a ring that you put between your shoulders. So again, it's something which is to tighten your begodim. It's not something which is not it's not a lavush. It's like something which is a mishamish to your lavush. So something which is a mashamish to a lavush doesn't have a din of a keli, like we learned, and therefore they don't have a din of mikabel tumah. Now tabas hashir shel behema, A shir shel behema is the collar that a behema wears around its neck, and then you put a ring on that collar, and then you put the leash on that ring. Is tabas hashir shel behema, the ring that you put on the collar of the behema, is hail va'odam meishach b'es behema, since this ring is used for a person to schlep this behema with, to pull this behema, is mekabelas tumah. The chein makel shel behema shel matches. So in other words, you have a metal stick of that hits the behema in order for it to go properly. Is hail va'odam reidei sabay, the person causes that the behema should walk properly with it. So it's something that's a mishamish la'adam. The person is using this makel shel matches. So memela is mekabelas tumah. So b'kitzer, in other words, something which is a mishamish la'adam, for example, with these bells which are mishamish to mashmir la'adam, and al derech if you have this tabas which is on the collar, which is also mishamish la'adam, or the piece of or the stick which is mishamish la'adam to get the behemoth to walk properly, all of these things are mekabel tumah because they're considered mishamish la'adam. Masha'inki is something which is for the behemoth is not mekabel tumah. A tachshav for a behemoth is not mekabel tumah. Halacha yud. Kol ha-keilim yerdu l'tumah b'machshava. In other words, machshava itself could cause these keilim to become susceptible to tumah. However, ve'in oila midei tumah, to become uis susceptible to tumah, is ein ella b'shini maisa. You need a shini maisa to change a keli to become uis mekabel tumah. And v'hamaisa, a shini maisa, is mevatum miyad ha'maisa miyad ha'machshava. In other words, if you make a shini maisa, that could change, even though you did a machshava earlier, which caused it to be mekabel tumah. Or you did a maisa before, which caused it to be mekabel tumah. So now the maisa could be mevatel and make it always be mekabel tumah. But v'hamachshava ain't mevateles le'miyad ha'maisa v'le'yad ha'machshava. If there was a maisa, so that maisa can't be changed with machshava. Ketzat. Tabas behema e keilim shechishav aleh lachzira tabas odom. You had a tabas which was miyuchad lebehema or miyuchad lekeilim, and therefore was not mekabel tumah. And then you decided that you want to make it a tabas odom. So the din is harezu mekabelas tumah b'machshava. That's the taich, the first line of this halacha. Kol ha-keilim yedin l'tumah b'machshava. As soon as you had a machshava that you want to use this tabas for a adam, it becomes mekabel tumah. Ukil nasis la'adam b'tchila sasiyas, as if it was mechatchila made la'adam. Now chosar v'chishav aleh la'nicha tabas behemek shaya. Now you change your mind. It originally was made for a behemoth, and then you decided to do it for a adam. That now it's mekabel tumah. And now you change your mind, and now you want to go back to the behemoth. So it says, no, avalpi shalei neskashit b'ha'adam. Even though a person never used this tabas yet, but lepel, you had a machshava for adam, is arezu mikabelas tumah. She'ena machshava mevateles midei machshava. That's what he said before. V'machshava, that was the third line. The third din. V'machshava ena mevateles le'miyad ha'maisa v'le'yad ha'machshava. She'ena machshava mevateles miyad ha'machshava ad sheyasa maisa b'guf. In order to change it, that it's no longer a tabas la'adam, you have to do something which should show that you want it for a behemoth, not for a adam. And sheyoshev esa eisakna b'maisa shel behemoth. You should rub it in a way that you're doing it l'tzerech ha-behemoth. I'm not really sure what would be like. You're doing something which indicates that you want it for a behemoth, not for a adam. But I'll call upon him. Maybe if you make it wider, so it's for a behemoth, not for a adam. I'm not sure what yoshev esa. Yoshev esa means you're rubbing it in a way that'll show that it's for a behemoth, not for adam. So b'kitzer, if you had a tabas that was originally for a behemoth, and then you decided to make it for a adam, becomes mekabel tumah. The fact that you decided to make it back for a behemoth doesn't change it, unless you do a mais. Fakert, hoisa tabas la'adam, if the tabas was originally a tabas la'adam, and v'chishav aleh le'behemoth, and originally was made la'adam, and now you decided you want to do le'behemoth, is adayin mekabelas tumah kshoisa. Because machshava doesn't take it out of a maisa. Adayin hi makabelas tumah kshoisa. She'ena keilim elim midei tumas machshava. Since it was a keli that was makabel tumah because it was asui la'adam, machshava can't take away the fact that it was elim midei that it was makabel tumah. But also b'maisa v'shinu lebehemoth. Masha'ingan, if you did a maisa, so then eina makabelas tumah. Sham maisa mevatum miyad maisa. So the nekudas advarim is that if you have a machshava could cause it to become susceptible to tumah. And once machshava causes something that was not susceptible to tumah to become susceptible, the only way to make it susceptible is through a maisa. Masha'inkin fakert, something that was susceptible, And to make it not susceptible, the only way to do it is through a Maisa. The only way to do it is through a Maisa. So either whether it was L'chatchila made La'adam, or it was L'chatchila made L'behem, and then you had a Machshava La'adam, the only way to make something that was susceptible to Tumah because it had a din of a Tabas Adam, either because it was originally made a Tabas Adam, or you had Machshava Tabas Adam, is only by doing a Maisa to make it into a Tabas Behem. Halacha Yudalev, Cheresh Sheiti V'Kotten, Yesh Le Maisa, Ve'in La Machshava, K'mishibani L'mayla, B'inyan Hechsher Echel. So Mela, when a Cheresh Sheiti V'Kotten takes something and wants to change it, so the Machshava, the Cheresh Sheiti V'Kotten, is not Negeh, because they don't have it in Machshava. So their Machshava can't be made it, don't cause it B'yed L'Tumah. Masha'in Ken L'Peil, their Maisa could change something. Because the fact that do a Maisa, either to a Maisa to make it for a Behemah, or to a Maisa to make it for a Adam, so that could change the status of a Keilim. Halacha Yud Beis. Zug Shel Delis. If you have a bell, which is on a door, Shechishiv Ala Lelo Behemah, which you decided to make it for the Behemah. So now it's on a door. On a door, it's not Makabel Tumah. But on a Behemah, it is Makabel Tumah. Like we learned before that a Zug that has a klapper is Makabel Tumah. So now if you have a Zug Shel Delis, Shechishiv Ala Lelo Behemah, Makabel Tumah. Fakert v'shel behema sha'asur ledelis. It was originally mekabel tumah because it was shel behema, and now you made it ledelis. Afilu chibre b'karka, even though you connected it to the karka. V'afilu kavi b'masma, you put a nail through it. Nevertheless, is mekabel tumah shahaya, because lepel it's the same bell. The bell didn't change. The metzias of that bell didn't change. So even though right now it's connected to the door, it's connected to the karka, the bell didn't change. So since this bell was originally a bell, there was a bell of a behema, and therefore it was makabel tumah. The fact that this bell became now connected to the karka, and it was kavi b'masmer, it's still makabel tumah. In order to make this bell that it's not makabel tumah, so it should become uis, a bell of a behema, become a bell of a door, that has to be a shinui in the actual guf of the bell. Halacha Yud Gimel. Uman she'oisa minir zugen lidlosis ula behema. An uman, craftsman, that makes bells, and he does it cipher behemoths and cipher doors. Is imreva asi l'davar shemekabel tumah. If most of what he does is for a davar shemekabel tumah, knows most of them is for behemoths, is that he akil mekabel tumah. So all his bells are mekabel tumah. Achi yafresh miktsasum l'davar she'eni mekabel tumah. Unless he melchatchila was mafresh miktsasum, the davar she'eni mekabel tumah. Now the question is, at what point in time? We'll soon go back. At which one point in time does he have to be mafresh the davar she'eni makabel tumah? In other words, we learned before that something that's makabel tumah is not yeded from that through machshava, but that's dafka when something was taka befedish makabel tumah. Masha'inkin over here, since we're dealing with an uman, which be'etzem everything is not so clear what it's for. We're just saying that they're all makabel tumah because Reiv is also makabel tumah. Now he was mafresh, so it's keel like a gloy, that this is what he wants it for. So even if you don't say it's a gloy muslim afreya, but lepel over here the machshava is going to help. Over here the machshava is going to help. That's this din. Nachamol. Umen she'esa u'miniyach zugen l'dlasul behem. Imrei v'asul l'davar she'mekabel tumah re'akel mekabel tumah. Ad she'yafresh miktsasum l'davar she'ena mekabel tumah. And once he's mafresh, so those things that he's mafresh are takanat mekabel tumah. Imrei v'asul l'davar she'ena mekabel tumah. So then it's a re'akel toher. And then it's very poshut that when he's mafresh miktsasel the davar makabel tumah, so then it's makabel tumah because it's because it's yeda the tumah even machshava. Halacha Yudalit zugin hanimtsoim b'chol makom. If you find bells mikabel tumah, normally you assume that the makabel tumah chutz mehanimtsoim b'krachim mipnei sherubim deglosis. So normally bells are not from doors. Normally bells are from behemoths. Masha'inkein and Krochim, so over there it's more common to have bells on doors. And male, if you find a bell in a krach, we could assume that it comes from doors, therefore they're not mekabel tumah. Halacha tezvov. Amar le'uman asei li shnei zugim. Echad ledeles ve'echad lebehema. Make me two bells, one for a door and one for a behema. Asei li shtei machzelois. Make me two mats. Achas l'shchiva, and then it would be mekabel tumah. V'achas leiholim, and one as an oil, and a machzelis as an oil is not mekabel tumah. Or asei li shnei zdinim, make for me two lilacher. Echad l'tzuris, one lilach that I'm going to have to make tzuris from it, but I'll call upon masadin, which is made l'tzuris, is not mekabel tumah. In other words, a person is going to learn. You're making a sadhana so someone should learn how to make tapestry or whatever different things that you're learning out from the sadhana. Al Kolpan, the sadhana is not going to be function as a keli, and the other sadhana I'm going to use as an oil. Now, when a sadhana is used in oil, the sadhana is makabel tumah, because it's a piece of cloth. A piece of cloth as an oil is makabel tumah. A machzelis as an oil is not makabel tumah. So, B'kitzur, the person made two things. One of them was susceptible to tumah, and one wasn't susceptible to tumah. So the din is harishnei makabel tumah, because each one is not clear which one is for which. He made it for both. So each one there's a suffix. Maybe that's for that one. Unless he says that this I'm making for this function and this I'm making for that function. And then so the one that he made for the one that's makabel tumah is makabel tumah, and the one that's not makabel tumah is not makabel tumah.